Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Drawing with Michael Clarida Arts. So today I'm going to be doing a really shallow examination into the basics of Photoshop. So one of my more popular videos on my channel has to do with Photoshop, learning the basics of Photoshop. And I've had just a myriad of comments from, hey, this really helped me, to, wow, this is really great, to, you know, this is terrible, you're going too fast, I can't understand you. You know, and one of the comments actually this morning was, you know, I got about 7 to 8 minutes in and you lost me. And that is not something that I want ever to happen in my videos. You know, I did that particular video a while back, and I received a new machine, and I got in there and I just started kind of toying around with you know, some of the really simple basics of Photoshop. We're going to go a little bit, I say shallow, but we're going to go a little bit on a different vein and really examine just the interface and some of the really simple tools. Now, I'm coming at this from a viewpoint of somebody who paints in the program, somebody who does color adjustment in the program, somebody who illustrates in the program. And, you know, I'm not coming at this as a person that utilizes this primarily for photo retouch. And so if you've landed on my channel that, you know, because of the way that I've worded the title, it's not clickbait or anything, but it's not really, in my opinion, I'm not using the program to its full extent in terms of photo retouching. I know how to do all that stuff, don't get me wrong, and that might be a tutorial for a later date. But this morning, we're just gonna learn how to launch the program. I'm going to be working on my yoga book, 920, which of course is a PC. And the process is very similar on a Mac. I mean, you click the icon, but we're going to go through that, setting up a document that I think would be really good for illustration, and understanding the layers palette, understanding the tool palette, getting in there and looking at the brush modification palette, and not palette, but window, and just understanding, you know, the real baseline basics. I'm not getting in there, getting into all the minutia and all the just the incredible things that this program can do, because it is kind of like a Swiss Army knife, right? You know, if any of you are familiar with Swiss Army knives, you know, it's got a lot of tools in it. And just like I encourage you to learn, you know, a myriad of different programs and understand them, Photoshop is really kind of, again, like a catch-all. It can do so much. But what we're going to do is we're going to get in there. We're going to really learn just a little bit, you know, just enough to get you into trouble. So hopefully I won't go too fast. And if I do apologize. And I'm trying, again, to get, you know, this baseline. And this is just the first of probably about 5 videos about Photoshop and learning how to use the program in a simplistic way, because a lot of times we get in there and it's just so overwhelming. There's so much, and there's so much you can do, and there is, but you always have to start at a level that, you know, is comfortable for you, and hopefully I give you guys that. So enjoy. Okay, so the basics of Photoshop. I'm going to be drawing just a really quick little doodle for you guys. This isn't going to be a super long video, I hope, in quotation marks. I do tend to get a little bit too wordy in some circumstances, but I really want to cover the subject matter instead of just hitting on it. So I've launched the operating system. This is a PC, and typically what you do is to find Photoshop. There's Painter. To find Photoshop, it's going to be over here after you've installed it. So to install Photoshop, what you're going to need to do is go to adobe.com, excuse me, and you're going to have to download something called the Creative Cloud Desktop. So let's go ahead and go to adobe.com. There's my channel, CADOBE.com. Okay, so adobe.com. And you're presented with a sales pitch immediately. Students save over 60% on Creative Cloud, which is fantastic. So typically you can get the entire Creative Suite if you're a student or a teacher for about $30 a month. for the entire Creative Suite, which is fantastic. I'm not really sure what Photoshop costs you every single month because I have the entire Creative Suite. So let's go up here. There are different tabs up top to creativity and design. And it asks, and they've got a bunch of different plans, featured products. So you can go, it says view all plans and pricing. Okay, so Photoshop and Lightroom you can get for $9.99 a month. So this kind of gives you an overview of what you can get with the Adobe products. I am not here to pitch you Adobe products, but I'm just here to show you what is involved in getting Photoshop on your machine. So basically what you would do, you know, let's say I wanted to get this particular one. See, it does have student and teacher pricing. This is what I pay a month. It says $19.99 for the first year and month, and $29.99 a month after that. I've got that $29.99. Then you have the business per license, it's $80 a month, so on and so forth. For individual, if you just want Photoshop, you can get it for about $9.99 a month, which is interesting. They have photography, 20 gigabyte. I don't understand what the 20 GB is. That might be a limitation. Anyway, I'm not here to, like I said, to show you the overall pricing and everything else and all this stuff. We're going to get into the program. So basically what you would do is you would hit buy now. It would download this program right here, which is called the Creative Cloud. Okay, that's what this is. This is the Creative Cloud. And it would show you, you know, what programs you have available to install. So then you would install them. And of course you have to create a username and password and all that other rigmarole. You know, everything's on a subscription base now. Not like in the old days, whenever you basically buy the program, you put in the licenses, and you can get updates as it progresses. Now they want you to pay them per month fee. So over here on the left-hand side, let's say you find your Photoshop. So you would click this. Okay, and it launches the program. Now I have it to where it's on the bottom tab, and for you to get it down there, we'll go ahead and let the program go through its startup. Depending on your computer and how fast your machine is and what graphics card you have will determine how fast the program will load up. So if I wanted to, let's say, add a program to my bottom tab here, all I would do, let me see if I can drag it. I've never tried that before. So let's go, let's see, Painter. Okay, so let's try Groove Music. Can you do it? No. So basically you would click long hold on a PC, it would bring this down, pin to taskbar, and then I could just launch it from here. And if you want to get rid of that, again, you would long hold and you would unpin from taskbar. Pretty simple, right? And to go back to the program, here we are. So Photoshop typically will launch with this particular interface. And you do see, unfortunately, you see these little marks. I don't know if you can see these little marks right here. I'm not sure why, but my Gorilla Glass, maybe it was something I had on my wrist or something, and I think I scratched my Gorilla Glass. Either that, or whenever I draw on my hand, it's just a little bit too heavy. And we've got a few little imperfections on the screen, so my apologies for that. But you're faced with this, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So just like in a lot of other programs, what you're going to do is you're going to create a new document. So I'm going to basically, I'm not going to touch anything else right now because I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed. So in other programs, to create documents, what you're going to do is you're going to go File. File is to create a new document inside of the program interface. So I'm going to take my cursor or my stylus. I'm going to come up here to the left-hand side, and I'm going to expand the submenu. Now, there's a lot going on. I mean, you look at this, and, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, export, share, search Adobe stock, automate, scripts. What's a script? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I just got to exit. I'm going to exit. Oh, wait a minute. What did I do? I quit the program. So that could possibly be a frustration. And we're going to go ahead and relaunch. And this time it's going to start up a little bit faster, I hope. I'm just showing you a possible, not a contingency, a possible variable, because a lot of times we look at the menus and we don't really understand how to read them. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a new document. So File, New. Oh my gosh, a whole nother set of submenus. Now what's great about Adobe Photoshop is it does have some pre-done templates that you can pull from depending on what you're doing. So let's say I'm working on a photo. Okay, it's got all these pre-done photo templates that you just click on one and then you can hit create. But I'm going to be doing this, you know, they have print, they have web application. Let's say you want to create a JPEG or something that is going online and you want it to be able to upload quickly. JPEGs is a file format that really lends itself to online bandwidth and file transfer of images. I'm not going to get into the differences between your JPEGs, your TIFF, your PNG, your transparency. All of that is a huge bucket of information that really will come at a later date. We'll focus on file types at a later date whenever it comes to Photoshop and file manipulation. But I've opened File, Open, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Art and Illustration, and I've got these different pre-done file type templates, and then it actually gives you templates that you can pull from, and it says free, free, free. They also, you know, if you want to find more images or templates on Adobe Stock, you can go down here and put in your keywords and hit go. Let's say you want to do movie poster, and it'll pull up a particular template for a movie poster, which is really cool. Dreamy watercolor, which is pretty cool. Just know that if you're going to download any of these items, you're going to have to remember that there is a file size, and it does require internet connection. But what I like to do is I just keep it on recent, and I like to do custom. So this is my custom over here. These are the things that I can change right here. So width, these are in inches, and you can specify whether it's in pixels, centimeters, millimeters, or points. Okay. You can change the width, the height, and the orientation. Orientation being vertical or horizontal. I typically will keep this at horizontal because I'm trying to emulate the size of the screen. I want it to be actual size. So this screen is 13.9 diagonally, I believe, by 10 inches tall. And I go through, I'm like, okay, that's fine. So then we have pixels per inch, pixels per centimeter. Since I live in the United States, I'm used to using inches, but I do use centimeters and millimeters quite a bit just because I do work with overseas vendors. And a lot of times I have to modify my file measurement type to facilitate the production process. So I'll keep that at pixels per inch. So just so it gives you a roundabout understanding of file types, excuse me, file types. Whenever it comes to print, 300 dpi is pretty much the minimum. 300 dpi is a really nice, and that's dots per inch or pixels per inch, you know, inch squared. So 300 pixels per inch squared. So in terms of print quality, you can blow this up to actual size and have zero loss degradation of file whenever you print it. Again, 300 dpi is a great number for different types of computers, because a lot of times if you go beyond 300 dpi, go to 350, 600, 1200, then you start getting into some 2400 dpi and some really dense pixels, then the computer has trouble rendering it. And that's something you have to remember. So 13 by 10, which is basically the size of this screen. And then we go to 300 pixels per inch. And now we're going to get into color types. So depending on what you're doing and what file type you're going to be exporting to, the color gamut per se, or the color type file that you're going to be utilizing is important. But I like to work in RGB whenever I go and I export. A lot of times to print, offset printing, I will go in CMYK. And again, this terminology here has to do not only with understanding color theory, but understanding file types and also how the computer interacts with the file that you're working with. So grayscale, obviously it's going to be in black and white and grays. Then you're going to move into RGB, which is red, green, blue, CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and lab. But it's not lab, it's LAB color. And this again has to do with how the computer processes the information. So then we come down here to the color profile. I don't typically mess around with any of these just because I've streamlined it down to the default. I can also change the background, which, I might go ahead and do because I don't like working on black background or a white background. So I can change that to a mid-tone gray. And then, of course, you get into the 8-bit, 16-bit, and 32-bit. And just so you understand, certain filters will not work in 32-bit. And depending on, again, what you're going to be utilizing the file for, whether it's gaming, whether it's illustration, 8-bit is just fine for sketching and drawing. So we've established that. And you can always name it if you want. And we're just going to do tutorial fun. Okay, now that doesn't save the document. All that does is to create the document. Okay, wow, so now we have the document in front of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit File, Save As. I'm going to have a designation of where stuff is. If you're familiar with computers and where you save stuff, a lot of times the default is going to be in the Documents folder. And sometimes depending on if you've been a user a long time, then that's no issue and you have all of your documents there. Me, I like to keep stuff on the desktop, and therefore I'm going to save it to the desktop. So by default, it's already started saving as a JPEG. Now, there's different areas you can save to. There's cloud, and you can save as a copy, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to keep it really simple, and we're going to save it as a Photoshop file. Now, you look at this. So you click on this top file type, and look at this. It's like overload. You're like, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know what a Photoshop RAW. What is that? Pixar. What is that? Photoshop EPS. All of these are file types that people have created and companies have created to help facilitate your needs as a user. That's why I said Photoshop is a Swiss Army knife of programs. Look at all the computer program or file types that it can save as. Now, again, we're not getting into these today because I don't want to overwhelm you. We're just going to save it as a simple Photoshop document. Okay. So then we're going to hit Tutorial Fun, and we're going to hit Save. So now I don't have to worry about recreating the document from scratch if I decide to quit it. So where do I go from here? Now, in Photoshop, there's areas that are customizable. Now, obviously, the entire program is customizable to you as a user. So you really have to look at this and remember that even though there's a lot of things you can do, there has to be a default setting. So this obviously is the way I like Photoshop. I basically like to use it as a drawing program. And so I've set everything up that way. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. So right now I don't have any of the submenus open other than the toolbar. The toolbar will come to you like this, okay, in its long format. What I like to do is I like to condense it because I've used Photoshop since 1997, and this is basically the way that I know Photoshop from the beginning. So the toolbar, oh my gosh, look at all the tools. Let's go ahead and get rid of the file really quick. Let's look at the tools for a second. Look at all the tools. To look at those and think that that was a good idea, I'm not really sure. I think that sometimes user interface people will look at certain things and look at the history of progression, and they don't want to change their base too much from the people who are used to the tools. But then you have new users that come along and they look at this tool menu and they're like, oh my gosh. And believe it or not, guys, this isn't even all the tools, because whenever you click on certain areas, it expands to a submenu and you get alternate tools that come out. At least I thought you would. I think my computer's messing up here. And let's hover over it. Interesting. I don't know why it's not doing it. Man, that really slowed everything down, didn't it? It's not even... Oh, there it is. So, you know, basically what I'm looking at... Okay, so whenever it comes to Mac, you can just click on that particular icon and it'll expand the menu. With PCs, you have to long hold and let go, and it'll bring up the two other tools. So it's like having two tools that are hidden, or one tool that's hidden from you unless you expand that sub menu. So let's go here. Again, we've got these sub tools that come up. And sometimes, again, it can be so overwhelming. You know, let's go down here, the type tool. Man, that's like blowing my face off. Oh my gosh, too many tools. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna look at this from a layman's standpoint, layman being somebody that has no exposure to the program itself. So over here are the tools. Now we're gonna leave those alone for a second. Up here is the tab that is attached to the tool, the current tool icon that I have selected. So watch, I want you to watch up here. I'm going to change the tool, and you notice the tab changes. The tab information up here changes. Every single time I change the tool, the tab information changes, depending on the tool that I have selected at any given time. And depending on what tool you have, and the complexities involved, and all of these little icons up here will modify the tool you're using. Pretty simple. Not really, right? You're like, holy crap. Okay, so now you've heard Photoshop has a myriad of ways that you can do the same thing. And let me tell you something, that is completely true. You know, I started Photoshop years and years ago, and I used it mainly as a layer compositing tool. And you're like, wait a minute, layers? I don't see any layers here. Here's the deal. So right now, in its current configuration, I don't have any of the sub windows, little icon floating tab menus open. So to see those, I go over here to Window, and look, all of these items are little sub menu things that will pop up. So let's go to Layers. I'm going to click on Layers. Boom. Layers comes up. Okay. Now I'm going to go over to, what else would be good? Character, something like a font. So the character would come up. Whoops, I'm sorry. Okay. Character. Paragraph. See what's happening right now? I'm starting to fill up my drawing space. This is why Photoshop has the potential, if you had all of these open, you wouldn't even see your drawing area, okay? So what I like to do is I keep things really simple. I typically will have color open, and color typically for me goes right up here, okay? Then I have character open, but I also, what's really cool about Photoshop is you can condense these sub-menus, and you can have them all in one area. So I'm gonna take this little paragraph, which has to do with kerning, how you're gonna set up different paragraphs, you know, whether you're gonna have it centered. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab this and I'm gonna drag it over and I'm gonna put it on top of the character menu, which now becomes one menu. So that's pretty cool. So again, you know, I'm looking at this in terms of a layman, not really understanding what's going on. So right now we have the color submenu, we have the character submenu, the paragraph submenu, and the layers submenu. Now, a lot of people use the navigator whenever they have a second screen, and it's really helpful if you have it on a second screen because it'll basically give you an out view. And if you notice, I can zoom in. But look, I can zoom in my screen here, but this stays the same. This is really helpful in composition whenever you have composition and you want to see things instead of having to zoom out all the time and see things, you can have your navigator open on a separate window. Well, we're going to go ahead and close that. And to close them, you hit the little X icon. So if I want to get rid of layers, I'm going to get rid of that. So it's gone. but I'm not going to do that because I want it open. So now if I want to minimize that and I don't want it taking a lot of my screen real estate, I click the little arrow right here. Okay. So again, here's the swatches. Now, what's really great about Photoshop and the redesign that they have is all of this right here is handy dandy over here on the right-hand side. So if I want to expand, I can, and I can see things that are in here without having to expand that submenu. Again, you know, doing things in a different way, it depends on the user. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. I can see the tool presets, and what you need to do as a user is to get into the program and to start clicking on things and finding things that help you accomplish your task. So they've got different swatch palettes. Here is my brushes. Okay, we're going to get into that in just a second. Here is the channels and the paths. Channels being the red, green, blue channel, showing, you know, the channels of the color. And here's the, you know, the channels and the transform tool. So also what Photoshop has done for the user is to create pre-done menu and tool and palette setups for the particular users. So they have 3D, graphic and web, motion, painting, photography. So if I were to go over here to photography, watch what happens. It goes to the photography default, what Photoshop and Adobe has deemed is proper for a photography user. Then if you go over here to motion, it's going to give you your timeline and all the things that are involved in creating motion graphics, and all of these things over here, again, for motion graphics. Painting, I use it as a painting tool, so I've customized it to be a painting tool. So let's go over here. One of the things that I like to do, I do like the way this is right here, because it shows, you know, the color slider. Now this is going to be the user preference, and every single tool again is customizable. So if I come over here, remember the X gets rid of it, the arrow minimizes it. I'm going to go to this little icon right here and hover over this for a second, and I'm going to click it, and here's a whole nother menu set. Oh my gosh, that can almost be unbelievably complex, but if you know what you're looking for, most of the time, it's not going to overwhelm you. So right now, it's a hue cube. Hue being color. I can go brightness. I can use a color wheel. I can just do grayscale. I can use RGB, so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit color wheel because I like the color wheel. Okay. Just as a painter would. Right. I've got my character set over here with my paragraph. And you're going to have to set your particular user interface up the way that you deem fit. This is the way that I have done it. Okay. So now, right now I've got everything in a floating window configuration. So if I take this and I put this over this particular window of the color hue wheel, it doesn't disappear. It's still there. And if I want to actually utilize the color wheel, I've got to click on that little sub menu here to use it. Now what I like to do is I like to go full screen. Okay, so one of the things you always have to remember about Photoshop, whether it's on a PC, whether it's on a Mac, whether it's on Linux, Unix, whatever it is, sometimes the program has hiccups, and that's to be expected because it is a machine and a program, and you know, people wrote it. So this is the full screen. And this is the configuration that I utilize it in, just because I like having a lot of real estate whenever I draw. Now, you can also hit full again, the F key. So basically what I'm doing is I've got a pre-programmed remote over here, and I've utilized the quick keys in Photoshop, which again, that is a user preference that you learn as you progress through the program. Certain keys on the keyboard will do certain things. So if I were to click the F key, and this is, just imagine this is the F key. See, every time I hit F, it goes into a different interface based upon my preference. So this is F. This is the normal interface with the tab frame. This is F again. This is full screen with menus. And this is full screen without menus. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go ahead and hit layers. Okay. So whenever it comes to, you guys have probably watched, I'm probably not the only how to use the base, Photoshop and the basics of Photoshop and the interface tutorial on YouTube. And a lot of times you'll notice you'll have this little hand that comes up, right? So the hand comes up and let's go ahead and hit a full. The hand comes up. And you notice they can move around this menu. You're like, how are they doing that? So in the context of transparency, I just want to let you guys know, quick keys are your friends. The quick keys to move the art palette around is the space bar. So go ahead and click the space bar and take your cursor and put it on your screen, and you can move around your palette. Your drawing screen, where you're drawing. That is important because I think that a lot of times we get confused of how certain users are doing things, and certain people that are doing tutorials, they're doing things and you're not understanding and you're going too fast. So hit the space bar for me and hit the space bar, and we're going to go ahead and just, move that around just a little bit. Now, the next thing has to do with zooming in and out. Some people have click wheels. So this would be what's known as a click wheel. So you have quick keys on your screen, or maybe you have a zoom in and out. You can zoom in and out. It's not letting me because I have gestures turned off. And then if you click Control and Alt together, Control Alt together, you can zoom in and out. Actually, it's not Control Alt, it's Command Control. So Command Control brings up the little eyeglass magnifier, and what you do is you can click once and then just drag back and forth. And again, that has to do with your graphics card. Actually, not again. That does have to do with your graphics card. If you have a weak machine that doesn't have the capability to scrub, it's called scrub zoom, then basically what you can do is you can click on the icon tool over here in the toolbar, and you can zoom in and out. Now, how do I zoom back out? Oh, crap. I think it has to do zoom out. So you can basically view, fit on screen. Fit on screen. Okay, so let's say I've zoomed all the way in and I'm lost. I don't know what to do. I zoomed in. What am I supposed to do? View, fit on screen. So these tabs up here, again, have to do with the current tool. So I can see right here, it says scrubby zoom. I can zoom all the way in, and then I'm like fit screen. I hit fit screen and it'll fit screen because it's tailored exactly to the tool icon that I'm on. So you've got a document open. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. We're going to go over here to the layers menu because the layers menu is pretty challenging if you don't understand it. So what we've done so far, we've opened Photoshop. We've created a 300 DPI document, screen size. We've done a filled background. We've also explained the quick features for moving the screen, and also the scrubby zoom. So Command Control together, two keys, Command Control, hold, click, zoom is in and out, scrubby. And if you don't have the capability to do that, then let's say you've accidentally scrubbed all the way in, or you've magnified all the way in using your eyeglass magnifier. We're gonna go ahead and fit screen. And we can hit fill screen, which will fill the screen based upon the current size of the document. Okay, so right now, my color icon's taking up a little bit too much real estate. So we're gonna go ahead and move him down here. And one of the other things that Photoshop has that we always need to remember is the ability to undo. So let's go over here to the window. Remember our friendly window that gives us all of these little tabs that will come up. So we're going to go down to history, Boom. Now, in the old days of Photoshop, when it first came out, you had the option to Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and it would go back sequentially all the way back. So you had histories, and that was awesome. And then Photoshop got rid of that, and they introduced the history palette. So let's say I come over here to my brush tool. Here's the brush tool. Now look what happened. I went from my magnifier over here to my brush tool, and the entire menu set up here changed, which is fine. So you're like, okay, I just clicked a brush. Now here's the deal with Photoshop. Photoshop has a lot of brushes. This particular brush, oh look, it's colored leaves. That's pretty. Yes, but I don't want colored leaves right now. So how do I change the brush? So just like the other tools over here, you come up to this particular tab up here and you start clicking things. Now, you're not clicking things to change instantaneously. You're clicking them to learn. So you need to understand that clicking one icon is going to bring up a menu. Maybe it's not applicable for what you're doing right now, but you need to read what it says. So no tool presets, defined or current tool. So in Photoshop, you can define certain tool presets. You can change things, pressure sensitivity, size, texture, and all of these variables that really cater to the artistic needs. So now we're going to come over here. Wow. So that was a big one. So let's go back. Here's the brush. We're going to click on the little one up here that has the number next to it that looks like something. Suddenly, I have a huge amount of information in front of me. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Now, in the Mac environment, what's really cool, let's say if you're working on a Cintiq, and it's a very large format, 22, 25, 20, whatever, 30 HD, and it does not have touch. You don't have to really worry about what just happened right here. See, unfortunately, the way that my PC is set up, the way my PC, whoops, I don't know why I did that. The way my PC is set up, it is touch. I'm not one to really promote touch whenever it comes to drawing, but this is what we have right now, so this is what we're doing. Just know that, any kind of false positives you make is something that can be fixed, so don't sweat about it. So we're going to go back to the brush icon in the tool palette. We're going to click that second brush, okay, or that second little icon that has the numbers in it, and look at all the brushes. Now, these don't come with Photoshop. The ones that come with Photoshop are going to be the general brushes right here. And I believe the dry media brushes come with it, and the wet media, and possibly the special effects. So we're going to come over, let's do the hard brown pressure opacity. Ooh, pressure opacity and flow. Now that's a lot of words. I mean, look at all the brushes. You have soft round, hard round, soft round, pressure. You're like, oh my gosh, pressure. So the harder I push, the more that I'm going to get. Yes. Hard round, pressure size. So you're going to get pressure size. The harder you push, it's going to be darker and it's going to change the size. That's what I was talking about when I said the amount of modification that you can make in Photoshop is almost unlimited. So now you're going to draw. You're like, wow, that's really cool. So I can do really simple, simple lines and drawing and whatnot. Yes, you can. And what's really cool, if you have a device that supports pressure, which this does, this is Lenovo 920, and also the technology. There's a myriad of technologies out there that Photoshop supports. It supports Windows Ink. It supports AES, which is Active Stylus. It also supports Wacom EMR, which has to do with Wacom's proprietary technology. But we're getting into this submenu here, and we're looking at the brushes. So just based upon all of this information, these brushes have presets. And you're like, okay, presets. Where am I going to see the presets? So up here, you see hardness. And this is just in this particular menu for this particular brush. If I change things, you notice how things change up here? Every single time I change the tool, things are going to change because these tools / brushes are preset from Photoshop, from Adobe. So we're looking at these variables here and we're like, oh my gosh, I can do so much. Yes, you can. But again, you know, we're looking at this in terms of a layman. So we don't want to start digging too deep because it'll overwhelm us. Okay, so we chose hard, round, pressure, opacity. Now, I don't like drawing on the background layer. And the reason for this is because in case I want to change the color of the item that I'm drawing, if I want to move the item of the color that or move the item of what I'm drawing, or if I want to change the layer composite. Now, this is, again, you know, we're looking at it in terms of basics, so we're just going to create one layer. This is the layers palette. All of this is information pertaining to the layer that you're on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to like, well, how do I create a new layer? There's a couple ways that you can do that, okay? We can come up here to the tab words. We can go layer, new, layer. It's going to ask you some simple questions, and you're going to hit OK. Now, right now, I just created a new layer. You're like, awesome, that's really cool. I created a new layer. Notice what happened to all of these items up here. They went from being grayed to now white. So we're going to go back. Since I have my XP pen remote programmed to Control Z, so I hit that button, so Control Z. So I went backwards. Now look over here at the history menu. See that? New layer. It's in the history. This records a history depending on how many times you want it to record. Remember I told you about the default settings? The default settings, I believe, for Photoshop for the history is 100 actions. So I don't like having that many actions because typically I don't go back 100 times. So, and two, you have to understand that depending on your computer, 100 actions is going to fill the cache at that particular moment. The cache being the information the program will store in your RAM, your total RAM that you have. And if you have 100, you can boost that up to 1,000 if you want to, and you can go back all the way to the beginning of the document. And that's only in the session. So if you quit, then the history gets saved and it goes away. Okay? And the next time you open up the document, guess what? The history that you had is going to be gone. Okay? So the history is only for the session. So let's go back. I'm going to hit that again. And look, it goes back. So you're like, I can go back all the way. I can go here. I can go all the way back to the beginning of the document if I wanted to. Okay? So right now, we're going to go back. We're going to put the history palette down here. And we're going to say, I'm going to create a new layer. Down up here, we showed you how to do it up here, new. And it asks you a whole bunch of questions. You can have a layer group. You can create an artboard from layers. You can have layer via copy. Let's say you copied a JPEG from your desktop and you wanted to paste it, and you can create a new layer that way. Okay, again, there's different ways that you can do the same action, but it's just a different path. Just like if you were walking maybe on a trail and there's a different path, you can choose which one you want depending on the difficulty, but you end up getting to the same result. So here, instead of going up here, because look, I come up here and it's basically, you know, an action to go up there. Now you can hit, I believe, Command N for new. I think that's what it is. Let's go here. It actually gives you the quick key for it. See? Shift Control N if you want to do quick keys. So it actually teaches you how to do the quick keys if you want to learn. Shift Control N, and it will create a new layer over here. But typically what I'll do is I'll just create a new layer from this little sub menu down here, the little plus icon. You can create a layer group. Let's say I click the one that has the folder. Suddenly I have a layer group. That's pretty cool. And every layer that I do subsequent will be in that layer group. And if I want to hide that layer group, the little eyeball right here, I can hide it. So, and if you want to get rid of the layers, group and contents. So, I've created a layer. Now, That's a lot of information to take in on the first setting up of Photoshop. Let me tell you something. Whenever I first got into this program, I was overwhelmed. As an artist that uses one of these right here, okay, on a piece of paper, I was dumbfounded in the complexities of this program. It was too much for me, and I got very frustrated very quickly because number one, I didn't have the information I needed. Number two, I didn't understand the interface. And number three, I was a traditional artist coming in from a traditional world, being able to have instant access, instant feedback to my painting and my drawing. Now, it took time for me to learn it, so please don't get frustrated. This is something that is very important. Frustration breeds just contempt, and it's one of those things that has the potential to really destroy your outlook on digital art. Never ever be frustrated. You accept the fact that you don't know what you're doing. You accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes, and frankly, if you make a mistake, it's very simple. You have the history palette right here. You can go back. You can go back all the way to the beginning of the drawing, okay? So I've created a layer. We're gonna go ahead and minimize, and we're gonna bring this down here because again, I don't want it to take up my space. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna come back to my pencil, and now we're gonna get to that particular brush. Now I like this brush, but look, what does not change? What doesn't change is the width, okay? Now, it said pressure opacity. So the only thing that's gonna change, depending on how hard I push, is going to be the opacity. Now, if I wanna change that, I can, and that has to do with all the little icons up here. Now, again, I'm on that pressure opacity brush that has presets, but I can change the presets depending on what I'm doing at that moment. These up here are where I'm going to change that, okay? There is opacity, so if I want to make the opacity less, the baseline opacity will be less. So no matter how hard I push, all the way, actually, as hard as I push, it'll only be maximum 36%. Now I can go back over it, and that'll be 36% maximum over the 30% maximum on the bottom. And that might be good if you're drawing or painting something in here that maybe a flower or something. So we're gonna go back. Typically what I would do is I would go select A and then clear, but I can actually go up here and I can hit delete layer, and then I'll just recreate a layer just for giggles, just to get everything set. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring that back up to 100%, and I'm gonna click this little icon here. Now that icon there was already on, and that has to do with pressure. Now if I were to click it off, watch, it's 100% all the time, no pressure involved, okay? So now the flow has to do with the amount of ink coming out of the brush at any particular time. So if I were to click this and click the flow down, you can see just a little bit at the beginning, okay? So what I do is I actually, just to get it more like a pencil, I come over here to the right-hand item that has to do with a taper. Oh, wow. So now we have a little bit of a different dynamic. And whenever you put pressure sensitivity coupled with the taper, now you have something that really feels like you're drawing with a real pencil or an ink pen or something along those lines. So just to let you kind of get a gauge of how I use Photoshop, right now we've gone through the submenus. We've gone through the brush interface in a very simplistic way. So let's choose one of my brushes that I like to use. Let's go. Now you look at all these. These have, again, they have presets to them. Okay. Let's go ahead and jack that down to about 80%. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw a simple line, and we're gonna vary the pressure. Now this is where, as somebody that hasn't used Photoshop before, really starts to get into where Photoshop shines. Photoshop shines as a painting tool, as a image modification tool, as a sketch tool, as a layer compositing tool. And we're looking at this going, wow, that's really cool. See, it's got a nice textured feel to it. Now, unfortunately, this particular machine and pen does not support tilt. Tilt being, if I was on, let's say, a Wacom Cintiq or a Surface Pro that supported tilt, if I tilted my pen down, non-vertical, and I were to tilt it, you would see the brush turn, and you could actually tilt it on its side, similar to an iPad Pro. Okay. Okay, so we've created a layer, and we have landed on a brush we want. Okay. Now we're just going to draw something really simple. Now you notice that it's not too dark. That's because I'm using the pencil as the pen/stylus as a pen/stylus. I've modified these variables up here to be customized to what I'm doing. So I'm basically going to draw this image just like I would if I was on paper. Now what's really cool, and you just saw me move that, I've got this pre-programmed. This is the control. I can click on the image inside, and it's actually moving it around. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of the background. And you see, I can move this around. So let's have it like right here. Okay. Minimize that because I don't want my hand to have a false positive right there. Okay. I like using Photoshop a lot. Photoshop's, again, one of those great programs that has stuck with me over the years. I've used a huge amount of programs in my day to create images, but Photoshop is just one of those that just seems to be getting better and better with time. It's like a good fine wine, if that's your shtick. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and make this mustache. Now I'm trying to show you something really simple. Remember that history palette? The history palette, again, see, I'm going back. I keep hitting Control Z, and it's going back in my drawing. Okay. And I'm hitting, just so you're not confused of what's going on, I'm hitting my pre-programmed spacebar button to move the drawing around, and then I'm hitting Command Control to zoom in and out. Okay? That's your quick key, Command Control. Okay, let's go ahead and now, since I don't have my keyboard next to me, typically what I would do is I would do Command T to transform this particular image. So instead, I'm going to hit Layer, since I don't do this too often, Image, Adjustments. Oh, where's my transform? You can tell that I don't use it like this. Type, Select, All, Image, Transform. Here, what we could do, we'll do this. I'll just move it down for you guys. Okay, so what we're doing, like I said, I'm not getting into the transform, we're just doing a little bit of drawing and trying to get you guys set up so where you can draw something simple. And since I want this video to be mediocrely entertaining, I just don't want to draw a ball. I don't want to draw a ball, right? Most people will sit there and draw a ball for you. Here's a ball. Okay, so we're going to have this mustache come around, And again, we're going to have this mustache come around. Okay, good. Come around. There's his nose. He's got these big bulbous eyebrows that come up. Okay. Nice. He's got his little lip that comes out. And it's got this chin right there. Okay. Not my best. But you know what? That's okay. And again, I'm using Photoshop in such a way that it really shines. I'm using it as a sketch tool. I'm using it as a layer compositing. So layer compositing, you've heard that terminology before, has to do with the stacking of layers. So think in terms of if you had pieces of paper and you were stacking pieces of paper on top of each other, then you would basically be layer compositing. And depending on how each particular layer is being treated, whether it's transparent, whether it has a color, whether you have a marking on it, whether you can see through that layer, whether it's opaque, that is how Photoshop really shines. So right now I'm just putting in my base sketch, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit of layer compositing here in just a moment. I'm trying to get my base sketch in here to where you guys can understand, you know, maybe an inking process. I just don't want to leave you guys hanging with, oh, here's a couple really fun ways to do things. I want you to actually, be able to do something and not have that failure. Because we all know, whenever it comes to programs, we get frustrated and then suddenly we treat it as a failure. And I never want you guys to have that. Never treat it as a failure. Failure is your way of learning. I love to fail. I fail all the time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the inking process really quick of what I do whenever I ink something. I'm going to have the sideburns come up. We need the ear back a little bit. Okay, oh, that ear is jacked down. Okay. Okay, so basically, like I'd indicated before, I utilize Photoshop as primarily a drawing/painting program. I'm not going to get into all of the intricacies currently of the things that you can do with this program. I just wanted to give you the basics of starting a document, okay, learning the brush interface, understanding the layer or the tabs that you can modify, setting up a document, and then just doing a little drawing, right? Just doing a little drawing and showing that, and also, understanding how to download the program, and knowing that once you get into Photoshop, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand too, and this is one of the things that I actually told the students whenever I was teaching at the collegiate level, I said, guys, I said, Adobe offers a myriad of resources, from online tutorials, to, free brushes. I'm constantly getting asked. Also, if you're viewing this as one of my regulars, which is completely fine, I do things for them, on a daily basis. Also, you know, to refresh. I'm always a firm believer in going back to basics and doing a refresh. If, you know, you suddenly find yourself bored, sometimes it's just good to go back and you go back to basics, you know, learn color theory. I love, I love seeing how other people do things. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So you see that I've got this taper on right now. I digress. I'm getting into the drawing process, and that's where that's my bread and butter. So if I want this brush to just be pressure sensitive only and not taper depending on pressure, see, now I can go in and it's just, see the difference? And then I'm going to turn the taper on. See that? See, and if I press harder, it's just like a pencil or even a marker. So if I turn this off, I can get really nice broad strokes for shadowing. And this is where Photoshop really has its strength, you guys. It's not just in photo correction. It's not just in, you know, layer compositing. It's not just in painting. It's not just in any of that. It's in all of it. You can do so many good things. And since it's not traditional, you know, if I was doing this with, say, a marker or a pencil and I messed, I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Okay, so if I did that traditionally, I've got that huge black mark. I might have to use whiteout. What's really cool in the digital, all you do is Control Z and it's gone. And I can make the brushes really big, you know, see, and depending on the computer as it chews, you know, and whatnot. But it is a very powerful tool for you guys to use. So again, if I want to change the position, I hit Control. Here's Control. Let's put him over here just slightly. And now here comes the layer compositing action. So I've got my sketch on one layer. Somebody asked me, how do you put color on one layer? All I do, okay, is I'll add a layer. Remember my little action down here? You can always go up here to Layer, New, Layer. But instead of doing that, I just hit this little plus button and I've got a layer. Now, by default, it'll put it above the layer you're working on. Now, if I want to, if I want to have it below, I'll hit the Control, okay? So to have it above, I click it and it's above. If I want the layer to be formed below, I click Control and now it's below, okay? What is the benefit of that? As you're working and as you're going through and drawing, a lot of times one of the biggest factors in drawing in one of these programs and also drawing on a tablet is the interface and understanding the quick keys and how things can stop you and take time. And then you're like, oh, so instead of here, drag down. Now, all I do is Control and it's there for me. So that saved, you know, 0.5, 0.2 seconds. And if I multiply that by 200, suddenly I've saved time. So that's how Photoshop, again, helps you. So we're back on our sketch layer. I create a layer above, and I go back to the layer. Now, to toggle between the layers, I'm going to click the layers. Now, there's quite a few things that you can do when you're in the layers palette to modify the particular layer. If you want to change the name, you click on the words and you double click. So then you can change the name if you want to. So let's say I want to change the name to Sketch. Okay, and then I click. Great. So that's really cool. So now I can basically refer, instead of having a million different layers named layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, now I can specify the layer as a sketch. And if I want, I can basically now, see, I double clicked on the layer. Cancel. So we're going to go ahead and long hold and it brings up a sub. So here's the deal. The complexities, again, in this program can be overwhelming. There's so many different ways to do the same thing. So if I want to color code my layers, I click here and I long hold, and it brings up a completely different sub menu. I can change the color, boom. Now that doesn't change anything on the layer. It just changes how I see it in the layers palette. I can go in, I can delete the layer, I can duplicate the layer, I can, again, this has to do with cut and paste, I can merge down, merge visible, flatten, all of the things that you can do with that particular layer. Also, you can change the way the layer interacts with what's underneath. That is a completely different situation. So for me to do that, I would double click and it would bring up your layer style. Now, what's interesting is you have all of these actions over here, and each one has a different way of interacting with the layer below it and the layer itself. So we're going to hit cancel. We're not going to get into that right now because I don't want to overwhelm you. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jot down the opacity somewhat, probably to about 30-35%, and I'm going to go ahead and get on to that next layer. Now, it's very important you remember, if you're going to use this as a reference layer, what I like to do a lot of times, just so I don't accidentally draw on it, is I'll lock it. Now, these little icons up here are what you utilize to, again, affect the layer and how it composites with the rest of its friends. So right now, I've got opacity, so I'm viewing it as an opaque, not opaque, but as a layer that I can see through. So if I were to go ahead and create a layer underneath, and I were to change the color, suddenly that sketch I can see, because again, it's on top of that layer. Now, since I didn't lock that layer, what can happen? If I'm messing around and I go ahead and I mess around and I forget what layer I'm on, I can actually accidentally start drawing on my sketch layer, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going ahead to lock it, and we're going to go ahead and get rid of this, and we're going to go back to our layer on top. Now, since this is kind of rough and easy and simple, I'm just going to go back to my black, go back to my brush, and we're going to refine the sketch really quick. I'm going to turn our okay. And it's wonderful, again, how Photoshop and the pressure sensitivity and the rendering engine, now, depending on what machine you have, will really dictate and how you have your pressure sensitivity set up. You can change pressure sensitivity on this particular machine, you know, not only up here with opacity, but you can also change, you have a smoother, which has to do, again, let's say if I have a smoother on here, you see how it has that delay? It takes time for the computer to smooth out all the little intricacies that maybe your stroke has, and there's going to be a time delay. So that's why I typically have no smoother on my sketch line. I like having instantaneous, I like having control over it, and therefore you're not going to typically see me use a smoother at all on anything that I do. See, we're just a business guy. Yeah. And I'm using that bottom, I'm using that bottom layer in the layers palette, not the bottom, because this is a layer, but it's considered the background, so it's locked. So if I accidentally, I'm like, la-di-da-di-da, oh, crap, oh, awesome. So I couldn't sketch on my sketch layer, which is really cool. So what I'm doing now is I'm just doing simple ink, right? I had somebody comment and they're like, dude, I can't watch your video. You're zooming in too much. You're making me sick. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that. My apologies to you. I never mean to make anybody sick. And I totally understand, because I went back and I'm like, yeah, holy crap. You know, if I were to sit there and watch that for an hour and I had an issue with, you know, screen movement and stuff, which I kind of do. I can't do those motion control, you know, the motion control rides. They make me sick. So, you know, going through and just having some fun, you know, messing around. Let's go ahead and do his ear right here. Here, I'm going to show you guys in a second here, one of the great things. Let's zoom out, make sure that we're doing everything okay. I wanted this to be a shorter video, but Photoshop is a very complex program, especially if you're starting out and you don't know what you're doing and you start getting in here and you get lost. Now, see, now watch, see what's happening. Okay, you see the blinking, that has to do with Photoshop and its interface in Windows 10. If I were to go ahead and get rid of that, then the blinking would go away. And this is typically right here is how I will draw, whoops, and how I will draw in this program, sitting on my couch, right? Now you notice I have this pre-programmed to change the brush size, which is really cool. So to change brush sizes, there's a little bracket, and I think it's the brackets on your keyboard, on the QWERTY keyboard. If you hit bracket up, it increases the size. If you hit the bracket down, it decreases size. Another way that you can do it is if you go here and you can change the size right here. So if you change the size, let's say to 60 pixels here, and I make it really big, again, it's bigger, so on and so forth. Now that's an additional action. And I think, gosh, if I remember correctly, depending on how you have your pen, you can actually have it set on your pen if you want to. It depends on you as a user and how you're going to, again, use Photoshop and catering it to you. But just you know, to get you guys started, here I'm sitting here, I keep messing things up. Messing it up. Just to get you guys started, just to change the brush size, you can do it up here. And that's perfectly fine. You know, I know one guy that I watch, he doesn't use quick keys at all. And he's a professional. And you're like, why don't you use quick keys? It's so much easier. It would streamline your workflow. You know what? It doesn't hurt him in any way. And again, you know, there's so many different ways to do the same stinking thing in this program. You know, whatever works for you is what's going to work for you. And that, you know, that's kind of a weird saying. However you walk is how you walk. But it's kind of one of those deals where, you know, I always look around and find different ways of doing things. And then I find the most efficient way. And then I find the most comfortable way. And you know, whatever works for you guys, please don't look at this as being the end all. Again, this is, you know, my way of doing this, and it's not necessarily the correct way vis-a-vis Adobe and Photoshop, but it's the way that I've learned how to do it, and it works for me. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is just going through and just shoring up some of the lines, you know, in this program. Actually, yeah. And like I said, depending on the machine that you use will actually, you know, your pressure sensitivity. I know Wacom has a really good pressure curve and you can adjust it. This machine is pretty good, but it's not great, right? So I might constantly go back and forth from the program to change the pressure sensitivity, but overall it's pretty good. So we're finishing his hat. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. See how I move things and I'm constantly zooming in and out? That is where that, where is it at? The navigator. Is it the navigator? That's where the navigator comes in. So let's say I'm over here and I'm trying to gauge, you know, where stuff is. You know, if I have it on that second screen, that navigator is really going to help me it's going to help me in seeing my composition from a distance. And that's what I'm constantly doing when I zoom in and out. And believe it or not, once I launch this little window, now that it's having to render the separate window, it slowed down my machine a little bit. This machine's okay. I mean, it's pretty powerful. And you're like, well, what machines are good for Photoshop? You know, my advice for you is the most powerful machine you can afford, and read the requirements on the Adobe website. You know, I can run Photoshop on my Surface Pro 5 and it runs pretty good. It takes a long time to launch, and this machine is a lot better, but still, these all-in-ones, whenever it comes to power, you're really compromising the capability quotient, and you need to understand that it's not a full, you know, powerhouse machine. It might say it's an i7 and it might have tons of RAM and whatnot, but you know, Photoshop is a resource hog. And just so you understand it's a resource hog, I'm going to show you something. Excuse me. So let's go to Task Manager. We're going to show you how much of a resource hog Photoshop is. So it's taking up 83% of the memory and 15% of the CPU. Now this has a GPU, but it's a shared GPU, and it's a pretty powerful one. I think it's got 2 gigs of video RAM. But one of the things that, again, Photoshop comes and the installer, whenever you install it, it views what you have and it sets the machine up depending on what you have available. Now you can go in and we can set things up here in the preferences, and you can basically, you can go in and you can change different parameters. You can change the interface color, dark, light. You can change your workspace. You can change your tools. You can do a lot of things. Your performance quotient, again, I've got this only set to 60%, so I can jack that up slightly. And I can go to advanced because I wanted it on advanced, and depending on your cache size, but we're not going to get into that because, again, we're looking at the basics. I don't want you guys to get like, oh my gosh, he's getting too advanced for me. So now that I've got my inking layer in, I go to my sketch layer and I can get rid of it. Now I'm one of those guys that really likes the sketch, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unlock that, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that back to probably about 20% because I like having the sketch in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the color layer. Now, in the drawing sense, there's something called local color. Local color is color without light or shadow on it. And again, we're not getting into the minutia of drawing. I'm still in the basics of Photoshop. So if you notice, when I was drawing, my hand kept going over and over again this palette over here. The unfortunate result of that a lot of times can be the fact that, man, I've accidentally changed where I am on the layers. So that's why you'll see me put it down, or you'll see me go into full screen mode just to make sure that I don't hit that. On touch devices, it can be a nightmare. And also, Windows has, you know, the touch capability is really good, but if I'm constantly lifting my hand and I'm putting it down without a glove, having false positives will drive you absolutely batty. So just realize, you know, you're going to have to deal with that if you have a touch device on these all-in-ones. Okay, so I digress. My apologies. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get back on this bottom layer. I'm going to put this down here. Okay. Now, there's quite a few different ways you can color fill. One of the easiest, obviously, is I'm still on my brush. I've still got pressure sensitivity on, and I've got taper on. So I'm going to go ahead and jack that up 100%. And I'm going to come over here to a flesh tone. I'm going to find a flesh tone. Okay. Just a flesh tone. Test it. Now, one of the things that I did early on is, I would put my color palette over here, and I would basically test a little bit lighter, double click, a little bit lighter, okay, double click, a little bit lighter. Now these are all on the layer that I'm on my color layer. So this gives me a palette that I can sample. So what I can do, I can increase my brush size and I can utilize this brush to color it in. Now this is the way that a lot of artists do this. And this is a good way. Now, if you have a huge amount of coloring to do, and one of the things I want to do is I want to turn the pressure off so it's 100% solid. And again, that depends on your preference. If you want to have a texture in there, that's up to you. You know, Photoshop is one of those complex programs, you know, like I said, that you can do so much in. And so now that I've got that in, okay. And let's say, you know, now that I've got my flesh tone in, I want to go ahead and I want to put on top of my flesh, because I want it to be a separate element, I'll go ahead and create another layer. So I used my little plus sign over here. Whoops. Okay, so we're going over here. And I'm going to choose a brown. Hue, brightness, color, okay, so let's go brown. And again, I'm going to go brown. I'm going to double click this. It's going to bring up the hue brown. And a darker brown. And this will help you. I'm going to show you how it's going to help you here in a second. So let's say I'm painting really quick and I want to use a color that's already in here. So let's go ahead and put in some of this black, or I'm sorry, some of the brown. And again, we're on a separate layer. Remember, we're on that layer, the brown layer that I'm going to put the mustache in. And so right now I have it to where it's tapered and pressure sensitivity. So if I do a little bit, I'm going to get a little bit. So let's go ahead and color that in. Since I'm doing local color, I'm going to go ahead and do that so it's solid. Now you're like, man, that's going to take forever. Oh, come on, dude. Where's the easy button, bro? Now, remember how I said there's a myriad of ways to do things. We're not getting into what you just saw just yet. I don't want to confuse you. There is a way to rotate the screen. It is the key R. So if you were to press R, this little tool comes up and you can rotate the screen. That is not going to be able to be happening on every single machine because not every machine is going to support rotate. Right? Actually, that might not be true. With all the machines out there now, they all pretty much have pretty stout capabilities, right? Okay. So as I color this, you're like, oh, there has to be a better way. Now, there is another way, and I'm going to show you. Okay. Now, remember all these tools over here. We haven't really addressed any of the tools. We're still in the brush mode. Now, there's something called a magic wand, because I don't really use it that much. There's the lasso tool. Then we have the magic wand, the quick selection tool, the object selection tool. I don't want to get into those because basically it's going to overwhelm you. So we're going to stay on the brush, and we're using this like we would a traditional, a traditional marker or one of those type deals. It's just I have the ability to change the opacity. I have the ability to change a lot of the variables of the tool. Okay. My apologies for going long, but I really want to make sure that you guys understand that, if you have just a very limited understanding of the tools that I've shown, you can still create really, really robust, great artwork. Right? Okay, so we're going to increase the brush size. We're going to rotate. Remember that R? Now you're like, how do I get back? How do I get back once I'm rotated? And you're going to do this. I guarantee you're going to go like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. All you got to do is hold the letter R, come over here to the rotate icon, double click it, and it'll go back to the neutral. Okay. So we're going to do this. Okay. Awesome. I don't know if the person is watching or not, but I had one of my users, one of my viewers, you know, recently I did a really quick tutorial on how to open, you know, similar to what I'm doing here, but a little bit more involved in here than it was in Procreate. And the comment they made was, iPad sucks. iPad sucks. Well, I don't know about that. You know, I guess it sucks for you if you don't like it, and that's fine. But I use the iPad in such a way that, you know, it doesn't suck for me. So hopefully, you know, eventually you know, they'll find their way to say the iPad doesn't suck. So I've missed a few spots. You can see it's kind of sketchy here and there. So if I want to sample the color, all I got to do is hit Alt on my keyboard. It's going to bring up the eyedropper. When I'm in the pencil or brush, it's going to bring up the eyedropper and I can go on the screen. Now, since I've got my color palette over here, I believe this is the color that I want. Now you can sample in here, but it's going to pull off of the image. So I have some sketch marks in here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Do that. Not bad. We're going to change to white. Zoom in a little bit, get rid of this. I'm still on the skin layer here. Good. Zoom in and out. We're going to give him some green eyes, some darker green eyes. Simple, not too difficult. Not getting into all the massive amount of tools that you can utilize, the color adjustments. I'm just doing simple drawing. You know, I know that that was really quick. So basically I'm in my brush. I double click on here to change my color. Cancel. If I want to sample a color, remember I hit Alt. I can sample the color in here and I can go in. We're a little bit too brown. We're just going to make you. We're going to do pressure. Okay. Sample. And we're still underneath our sketch. See, we're still underneath that primary sketch layer up here. So I'm still not really, quote unquote, drawing and painting. I'm just kind of like layer compositing underneath because I want to be able to modify some of these areas. So we're going to go ahead and create another layer on top of the other two color layers. And I'm going to come over here and I've got some browns, right? Now what's really cool is since you're looking at as a flat object, I can use my color dropper. And if you watch, I clicked Alt and I can run it over the browns and it's going to pick up the brown color. So I like that brown color right there. I'm going to go ahead and move this down. I'm going to increase the brush size. Okay. Now let's say, oh crap, I went outside the lines. Oh crap, I went outside the lines there. I'm kind of in a hurry. I want to get things done. You know, I don't really have the time to sit here and do, you know, inside the lines. That's completely fine. Here, I'm going to show you guys. Once you get it all marked in, you have to think in terms of capability of this program. You know, even though I went outside the lines, I don't count it as a mistake, you know. That's one of the things you have to remember about these programs. Now, let's say, now you see here, you see a little bit of transparency through there. If I were to get rid of the background, you can actually see how bad, since I have it on pressure, it didn't fill it in. So basically what you can do is you copy the layer, and then you can copy it again, and then you can select all of them. To select all of them, you go up to the layer and you hold the Shift button down, and you select all of them, okay? And then basically, whoops, Shift, layer, merge layers. And it merges it into one, okay? All right, so now I have my eraser programmed on my stylus to be this button. Actually, no, I don't. Oh yeah, I do. Okay. So what's really great in Photoshop is you can designate a specific custom brush for your eraser. Right now, my custom brush is this little leaf, but I'm gonna go down to my general brushes and I'm gonna do hard, round, pressure, opacity, and flow. And I'm going to hold it and look. There's my eraser. So whenever I press the button, now watch. It actually went right to it. So let's go back to brush, brush, eraser. Okay, see if you program your eraser into your stylus or you have a quick key, then it again lends itself greatly to your workflow. Okay, so then you're like, man, this will be the last thing I tell you guys. You're like, man, this is so outside my comfort zone. And I'm like, I get it. I get it. You know, and then you're looking at it going, now I got to sit there and I got to color all the shadow layer and whatnot. But what's great about digital illustration is the ease to which you can do certain things. So now I'm on this particular layer that has the brown hat. So let's go back. Let's look at our dude. I want to make this blue. Let's add another layer and we're going to go ahead and shore that up. We're going to make that blue really quick, just so you guys can't say that I didn't finish this particular illustration. Right? And you notice I'm coloring over the skin tone that I've got underneath. It's still there. Okay, so let's go back to flush. Remember, I'm doing Alt, so I've changed layers. I'm going here, I hit Alt, I'm selecting that flesh tone layer, and I'm go ahead and I make that the way it needs to be. Go back here, select here, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to make sure I have that tone or that hue over here. Okay, so now one of the little things that I like to do is just put in, whoops. Okay, so now I'm on the hat layer again, and you're like, okay, now I want to color in the banding. Now there's a couple ways you can do that. So let's get that brown. Let's get that other brown. I like that brown right there. And you're like, okay, I can go ahead and do this. Oh crap. Now, there's a really fast way of doing this. Over here on the layer palette, okay, there's all of these little icons. Lock the layer, we already talked about that. That locks it, I can't do anything. So we're gonna come back. Now I'm going to click this button right here that looks like a flag, like a little flag. And it basically says lock transparent pixels. Lock transparent pixels basically means I can't draw out here. Okay, the only place that I can draw is where it's active, where I've got active ink. See, look at this. So now, what's really cool, let's go ahead and get rid of the sketch. Okay, so now watch, I'm gonna drag it across and it stops right there. That is so handy whenever you're working on different layers and you're doing layer compositing. So let's go ahead and rotate this just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and block in this local color banding. And see, I'm just going to basically, it basically colors in the lines for me, which is really cool. So now what I can do is I can start putting in all my shadowing. I can put in different highlights. I can go in and really start getting involved in rendering, but we're going to do that on a different video. I just wanted to show you guys the basics of starting a file, understanding the brush palette. Okay, remember we talked about the brush palette. Here's the tabs up here with the different pressure sensitivity icons. You know, we come over here, here's the brushes. Now, we can get into this whole area, but that's going to be a separate video. That has to do with how the brush interacts and how you can customize the brush from the shape dynamics to the texture, the scattering, and all of the things that are involved with creating custom brushes. That's a whole different video. But I just wanted to show you guys that you can get started in Photoshop and not have it overwhelm you, right? That's one of the big things. And what's nice is I've got this set up in such a way that now I can really start getting in there and having some fun. So File, Save, Document saved. Let's go ahead. Here's the full cartoon. And then finally, here it is in its tab window configuration. Again, you know, we've set it up. We've set our interface up to be easily accessible. You know, we didn't get too much into some of these upper tabs, and we didn't get too much into the into the tool palette, but I just wanted to show you guys, you know, the way that I use Photoshop, especially when painting and drawing. We're going to definitely get into more of these videos. I'm probably going to do about 3 to 4 more videos about Photoshop and understanding and learning some of the tools involved over here. Some of them are really useful. Some of them are specific to photos. You know, Photoshop can do a lot of things, and sometimes, you know, even if we've been using it for a while, you know, we look at it and go, gosh, I'm just still learning about this program. And that is pretty much the key. You have to have that mindset that you don't know everything about the program and that you're still learning. So that's it. Hopefully you guys got something from the video. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see. Share, and definitely check back soon, because the next video, again, is going to be learning the basics of interfacing and drawing and painting in Photoshop. Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon. Bye.